Thank you. When I say to people that I think sex and birth are essentially the same, I get a lot of dubious looks. And I get it. Our ideas about birth really don't have a lot to do with sex in the society. Excuse me. And when we think about birth, we often think about birth as being something that we have to endure in order to have a baby. And when we think about birth, we reframe that a little bit to include birth on the spectrum of a woman's sexual experience. We actually have an opportunity to learn about birth in a whole new way that can change the way we operate in the hospitals, at home, and how we are able to help have healthy families. So essentially, I'm here to say that we need to put the sex back into birth. What gets the baby in, gets the baby out. The hormones of birth and sex are identical. Oxytocin, which you probably know from that great orgasmic feeling, and those beta endorphins that make you a little bit sleepy after sex, are also present in birth, and they allow women to sort of disconnect from the neocortex, the rational mind, and allow the limbic system, which is the ancient instinctive mind, to come forward. What we also understand is that when adrenaline is in either situation, in sex or in birth, that orgasm becomes a little bit more elusive, and that labor can actually completely stall and stop. How women process or how women increase their sense of pleasure through movement, sound, and touch can enhance their orgasm. Movement, sound, and touch can decrease their sense of pain in childbirth. How women behave in both settings. How they moan, how they rock and move their bodies. Their nipples become erect, they sweat, they're flushed, the vulvas become engorged, increased vaginal discharge, same. What I think the most curious part of it is that the brain in birth and brain in sex are pretty much identical. Pain in childbirth is the only time your body's not going, oh my God, something's gone terribly wrong. Your body's going, oh my God, we're having a baby. Let's make this longer, stronger, and closer together. The neocortex, the rational mind, is what becomes silent, and the limbic system is the part that's active. So what that means is that in order to get into that limbic system section of your brain, which is the body function and the emotional center of your brain, you have to have a lot of sense of security and a lot of care and set that stage for that oxytocin to really thrive so the limbic system can start to speak in that setting. Birth and sex can look really similar, can be really sensual. And in fact, when women's labors stall, oftentimes a medical provider, a midwife, will say, why don't you have some time to kiss or do nipple stimulation or clitoral stimulation, and that will increase your contractions again. And it will also decrease your sense of pain with those contractions. Birth and sex can also sound the same. In one of these audio clips is a woman orgasming, and the other audio clip is a woman who's pushing her baby out. Let's see if you can tell the difference. So raise your hand if you think the first one was birth. Okay. Raise your hand if you think the first one was sex. Okay, the first one was the baby coming out. The second one. My friends were very, very helpful in providing these audio clips. My email inbox was really quite interesting that day. I got good friends, really good friends. So is this a setup, though? Isn't a healthy baby enough? We always say to women, oh, at least you have a healthy baby. You know, what if women want to choose the technology that's available to them? I don't want to feel contractions. I want that epidural. Great. What if they need it? What if that cesarean section is life-saving for that baby and for that mother? Also great. Technology is not the demon here. It's not a problem. But the overuse of technology is creating problems. We need a sexual revolution in birth in the United States. About a third of the women in the US give birth via C-section, which is major abdominal surgery. We have normalized this, but women have months of recovery with a newborn when they go home after a cesarean section. The World Health Organization says that that number of the rate should be less than 15%, and that anything above 15% in a country is actually unnecessary, that we're performing unnecessary cesarean sections. And what's interesting is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology released a statement in about 2010 saying that 2/3 of everything that's done in obstetrical care is not based on the medical science. It's not based on evidence. About 1/3 of all women in the United States experience what they would define as traumatic birth. And PATCH, which is the Prevention and Treatment of Traumatic Childbirth, defines traumatic birth as a woman feeling like her or her baby's life was at risk in that experience, and if her emotional or her physical integrity was compromised. These have really long-lasting impacts on a woman's life and on a family's life. What we see postpartum in the United States is about 20% of the population experiences perinatal mood disorders in women. About 10% of the population of men also are experiencing depression. What we're also seeing is how this impacts relationships. And it's no surprise that 90% of all families would say that there's more tension in their relationship after they had a baby. Yes, you are tired. Newborns are challenging. But 60% say that they're actually less satisfied in their marriage after having a baby. And about 30% of all American men will leave the relationship within the first year after birth. The saddest statistic I'm going to share with you today is that in the United States, we have 59 other countries in the world who have a less maternal mortality than the US. More women in the US are dying now than 50 years ago. 6.6 per 100,000 was the death rate 50 years ago. Today, it's close to 20 per 100,000. This is a really, really big problem. We also understand that disrupting physiologic birth, and when I say physiologic birth, I'm talking about if you were to leave to a mammal, which, surprise, we are all mammals, to their own devices, this is how their body would function. Physiologic birth, disrupting that process has impacts on maternal-infant bonding, can disrupt or delay breastfeeding, can actually disrupt the bacterial transfer from the mom's gut to the baby's gut. Because when you give birth via cesarean section, we skip that microbial transfer through the birth canal. And then we're starting to see babies born via cesarean section have higher rates of asthma, have higher rates of celiac disease, allergies, obesity, diabetes. Maternal health impacted, sexual health, relationships, and even other pregnancies. Because in a lot of the hospitals in the United States, if you've had a cesarean section, then you have to have another one. There's no choice. Birth matters. It matters. Penny Simkin, who is an amazing author and researcher, she wrote a wonderful book called The Birth Partner. She did a study of her childbirth classes in the 70s, and she had them all write their birth story. And then 25 years later, she contacted those students again and had them write the same survey. And what she discovered is that women tell their story exactly the same. The story does not change in 25 years. And what made their birth feel satisfying for them was not whether it was an epidural birth, a cesarean birth, a hospital birth, a home birth, a natural birth. It had to do with how she was treated through those decisions. What sort of consent did she receive for the care that she received? Was she educated about the process? Were people there to say, yep, that's normal? Or here, we can try this instead? Or was she left alone to labor by herself? What's also interesting is that women who have dementia may not realize that their child is sitting right next to them. But if you ask them their birth story, they'll be able to tell you about the birth of their child, of that child. So how do we put sex back into birth? What does that really mean? So things that make sex feel really good tends to have to do with safety, consent, care, loving touch, privacy, respect. And when we apply those things to birth, by allowing women to be active decision makers and receive informed consent and give them the privacy and the space for their bodies just to do what their bodies are meant to do, then we start to see more physiologic birth, better outcomes, less need for that technology, healthier baby, healthier mom, healthier families. So how do we do this? Know your provider. There's a really big difference between obstetrical care and midwifery care. If you're a high-risk patient, you want that OB because they are masters in high-risk birth. If you are a low-risk pregnant woman and you want to have a vaginal delivery, I would recommend looking into midwifery care because it's a completely different value system. How these providers are taught is drastically different. One sees birth as a pathology, one sees birth as normal. And that's going to really impact what type of birth you have. If you walk into a hospital and that provider has a 50% cesarean section rate, guess what type of birth you're going to have. Know your provider. It also doesn't do your provider any favors to have kind of a misalignment in your value system. If you really want a home birth, then try to find someone who will support you. That's going to be really hard to achieve in a hospital setting. Become educated. Women are wildly misinformed about birth. Men too. It's really kind of hilarious to me. But people say to me in classes, they'll say, Kate, I have no idea how this baby's going to get out of my body. Like, what? It does not fit. And I say to them, let's step back to the last 9 months of your pregnancy, and let's consider what your body has done while you're eating, sleeping, having sex, going to work, walking, meditating. Your body's built a placenta. Your body's built a human being. Your body's built the organs for the human being, and that human being's nervous system, and a brain. If your body can build a brain, you can have a baby. From your body's point of view, the birth is just squeezing one organ over and over again, or one muscle over and over and over again, and then out comes the baby. So for your body, birth is not very complicated. It's your brain that needs to be on board with birth. Get support. There are really great studies about the role of doulas, which doulas are labor support people that are specifically there to support women emotionally and physically. They don't provide any medical advice, any medical anything. And if you have a woman in the room, a friend, a doula, a mother, a grandmother in the room, what they've discovered is that the need for synthetic oxytocin, Pitocin, which creates contractions, or epidurals, which numbs contractions, or other narcotics, pain narcotics, or cesarean section significantly decreases. But what also increases is that woman's sense of pleasure in that experience. Her sense of feeling like, wow, I totally did get it. I did it. The satisfaction of her birth increases because that person is there to set the stage for the oxytocin and for the limbic system to really express fully. Reinvent the idea of a birth plan. We come in with 20-page plans of you can do this, you can't do this, you can do this, which is a nightmare for everybody, do you know? And we're thinking about birth from your emotional needs. How do I need to receive information to feel safe? What does informed consent mean to me? Some people say, I don't want to know anything. Some people say, I want to know exactly what's going on. Communicate that with your care team. What type of touch is good? What does support mean to you? That's what should go in your plan, not what you want to happen and don't want to happen, because guess what? Your babies have their own ways in the world, and from birth, you kind of just got to be along for the ride. Change the future. Here's the thing. People don't come to birth and all of a sudden have a certain idea about their body or their self-worth or their sexuality. You have been living with this body your whole life. And those ideas about your body have influence at that moment of birth. So I challenge you to think about, how do you talk about women's bodies in your community, in your homes? How do you talk about sex in your homes? Do you talk about consent? Do you teach the children in your life good touch versus bad touch? Safe body boundaries? Do you encourage them to practice those things throughout their life? The biggest indicator of a woman's body image is actually how her mother feels about her body. So how do you feel about your body? And what do you say about your body? And think about the people around you who are listening about that. Because if you think your body's remarkable, and that you have self-worth, and that you own your body, birth is not something that happens to you any longer. Birth is not far away. It's incorporated in what's normal about your sexuality. The other thing that's interesting that a sex researcher, I just read yesterday actually about a sex researcher discovered that women who understand their vaginas and their vulvas have better sex, have less anxiety about their body, and are more likely to engage in reproductive health care. So when we put sex back into birth. We disconnect from routine care and really can sit with the humanity of that experience and really be with women for where they're at and provide a space where they can birth from a place of knowledge and a place of really feeling reassured, empowered, and respected, a place of integrity. And who knows, we may even save lives while we're doing it. Thank you.